Nena, you forgot to clean this glass yesterday. You're so old and lazy. I don't even know why Chinedu keeps you here. Do your job properly next time. I could be your mother, you know. I'm not so young anymore. Just be a little more patient with me. My mother could never be a poor, disgusting maid like you. So stop acting like you're anything important and do your job.
23 years ago, in a small village where traditional rules were strict, a young girl named Zakura stood in the pouring rain. Her heart was beating in her throat. She had just told her lover, Emeka, the biggest news of her life. She was pregnant with his baby. Zakura thought Emeka would smile. She thought he would hold her hand and promise to build a family. Instead, Emeka's face turned cold. He looked at her like she was a disease. He told her he was not ready to be a father and walked away into the dark, leaving her completely alone.
I want nothing to do with you or that baby.
Emeka, please do not leave me. Emeka!
Forget me, Zikora.
When Zakura ran home to her parents, crying for help, her father did not hug her. He pointed his finger at the door and shouted that she had brought shame to his name. He threw her out into the cold night before the sun could rise. Have you ever been abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you? Comment, stay if you would have stayed strong, or give up if you think the pain would be too much. With no food, no shoes, and no place to sleep, Zakura held her stomach and made a secret vow. She promised her unborn child that no matter what happened, she would never give up. But what happened to her next was a nightmare nobody saw coming. Zakura slept on dirt floors. She swept dusty market yards for pennies. She sold sweet oranges under the burning sun while other girls her age were playing. When her labor pains started, there was no hospital. There were no soft pillows. Zakura collapsed in a dark room, screaming in pain, praying to God to save her child. When the baby finally cried, it was a boy. She named him Chinedu, which means God leads. Holding that tiny child in her arms, Zakura knew her life was no longer her own. As years passed, men tried to date Zakura, but every time a man showed interest, he made one cruel demand. He told her she had to choose between him and her son. Zakura rejected every single one of them. She chose her boy every single time.
You care for him too much.
He is my child.
You will never love me fully.
When Chinedu grew old enough to go to school, he came home one afternoon and looked his mother in the eye. He asked her why he did not have a father like the other children. Zakura swallowed the lump in her throat and told him the truth. She told him how Emeka ran away and how her parents threw her out. Young Chinedu did not cry. He wrapped his small arms around his mother's neck and made a promise. He promised he would study until his fingers bled and make her proud. Do you believe a single mother can raise a king on her own? Tell us in the comments. One afternoon, while walking down a busy city street, Zakura froze. Standing right in front of her was Emeka, the man who had abandoned her in the rain 23 years ago. Zakura pulled Chinedu forward, hoping the man would feel a tiny drop of love for his own flesh and blood. But Emeka looked at them with pure disgust. He told Zakura that he was now rich, married, and had a respectable family. He warned her never to mention his name again and begged her to pretend they had never met. Chinedu watched his biological father walk away without saying a word. He turned to his mother, pulled her close, and told her never to look back. He vowed that Emeka would one day watch him become someone great from afar. From that night on, Chinedu lived at his desk. While other children slept, Chinedu coded under a flickering light bulb. Zecora sold everything she owned to pay his school fees. Years of tears turned into magic. Chinedu built a revolutionary payment app for small businesses. Within months, his small startup exploded into a massive empire called Evergreen Tech Solutions. Overnight, the boy raised on market dirt became a billionaire. He built a mansion so big it looked like a palace. He bought his mother expensive clothes and begged her to live in his grand house. But Zecora stayed humble. She loved her small home. Chinedu had everything a man could dream of: money, power, and fame. But he was missing one thing, and the woman he chose to give his heart to was about to destroy his entire life. Chinedu fell in love with a woman named Cynthia. Cynthia was a high-end fashion designer. She wore expensive designer dresses, spoke with a smooth accent, and moved like royalty. After a few months of dating, Chinedu took Cynthia to a private rooftop dinner, pulled out a diamond ring, and asked her to marry him. Cynthia gasped, smiled, and said yes.
Will you marry me?
Chinedu, yes, of course I will. I love you, Chinedu.
When Chinedu brought Cynthia to meet his mother, Zecora's heart sank. Cynthia smiled with her teeth, but her eyes were cold. Zecora could sense something was wrong, commented uneasily. She warned Chinedu that a pretty face does not mean a pure soul, but Chinedu was blinded by love. Evil strikes when you least expect. Subscribe now before the next twist catches you off guard. A few days later, Zecora was walking home from the market when two dangerous thugs cornered her in a dark alley. They grabbed her bag and pulled out knives. Zecora thought her life was over, terrified. Suddenly, a young woman jumped into the alley. She did not hesitate. She screamed at the thugs, threatened to call the police, and stepped right between Zecora and the weapons. Scared by her bravery, the thugs ran away. The young woman's name was Blessing. She was a humble secretary working at Chinedu's company. She had no idea who Zecora was. No idea if Zecora was. She saved an old stranger simply because her heart was pure. Zecora looked at Blessing's soft eyes and realized something incredible. But what Cynthia was planning back at the mansion was darker than anyone could have imagined. Zecora knew she had to protect her son. She asked Chinedu for permission to perform an extreme experiment. She wanted to move into his mansion, not as his billionaire mother, but disguised as a poor, elderly housemaid named Nena. She wanted to see how Cynthia treated a servant when she thought no rich people were watching. Chinedu reluctantly agreed. He told Cynthia to move into the mansion early so they could plan the wedding. The moment Cynthia stepped through the front doors, her sweet act disappeared. She threw her heavy bags at Nena, the maid, barking orders like she was a slave.
Nena, bring me some water. Your water, Ma? Madam, your dress yesterday was very beautiful. Nena, just do your work. You do not expect me to reply to your village conversation, do you?
That evening at dinner, Cynthia tasted her soup and threw her spoon down. She screamed at Nena, calling her stupid, slow, and useless because the food was slightly cool. When Chinedu pulled Cynthia aside and asked her to speak gently to the old maid, Cynthia scoffed. She told Chinedu that poor people are like dogs. If you are nice to them, they will bite your hand. Zecora stood in the corner in her stained maid outfit, taking in every single word. What would you do if you saw your partner abuse a poor worker? Would you end the relationship right there? Right, leave, or stay in the comments right now? The abuse got worse every day. Cynthia snapped her fingers at Nena, calling her a disgusting old woman and telling her she was lazy and worthless. One afternoon, Blessing arrived at the mansion to drop off a forgotten business file for Chinedu. She walked into the living room and saw Cynthia screaming at Nena, preparing to slap her across the face. Blessing ran forward and stepped between them. She looked Cynthia in the eye and told her that money does not give anyone the right to strip away another person's humanity. Cynthia sneered and told Blessing to get out. But before Blessing left, she took Nena's rough hands and whispered that if the job was too painful, she could come sleep at her small apartment for free. Zecora's eyes filled with tears. Blessing had nothing, yet she offered everything. Cynthia had everything, yet she offered only cruelty. 2 days later, while sweeping the hallway outside Cynthia's bedroom, Zakura heard Cynthia laughing on a phone call. She pressed her ear to the door, and what she heard made her blood run cold. Cynthia was pregnant with another man's child. Because Chinedu had insisted on waiting until marriage before being intimate, Cynthia knew she was trapped. She told her friend on the phone that she was going to slip a heavy drug into Chinedu's drink that very night. Once he was passed out, she would trick him into believing they had been intimate, pinning another man's baby on his name to secure his billions. Zakura's heart stopped. The trap was set for tonight. That evening, Chinedu walked into the mansion, looking exhausted. Cynthia ran to him with a fake sweet smile, holding a tall glass of juice. She pressed the glass into his hands, gently telling him to drink it all so he could relax. Chinedu raised the glass to his lips. Cynthia watched with hungry eyes, holding her breath. Just as the liquid touched Chinedu's lips, Nena sprinted across the room and slapped the glass right out of his hand. The glass shattered across the marble floor, spraying poisoned juice everywhere. Cynthia went wild, screaming. She screamed at Chinedu to drag the crazy old maid out of the house and throw her in jail. Chinedu stood up, his face dark. He looked at Cynthia and said 3 words that froze her blood. She stays. You leave. Cynthia gasped. What are you talking about? She's just a disgusting servant. Zakura stepped forward, untied her dirty maid apron, and let it drop to the floor. She looked Cynthia straight in the eye and revealed the brutal truth. Confidently, she repeated every single word Cynthia had said on that phone call. The secret lover, the pregnancy, and the drugged juice. Cynthia's face turned ghost white. She fell to her knees, crying, lying, begging Chinedu for mercy, desperately, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Chinedu looked at the woman he thought he loved with pure disgust. He called his security guards and had her thrown out into the rain, just like Emeka had thrown his mother out decades ago. Only subscribers survive the ultimate plot twists. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss the truth. Even though the snake was gone, Chinedu was broken inside. He sat in his empty mansion, staring at his mother that he could never to woman again. He believed every girl was just looking for a golden ticket. Zakura put her hand on his shoulder and mentioned Blessing's name. But Chinedu shook his head warily. He was terrified that Blessing was just better at hiding her greed. So Chinedu decided to execute a final, terrifying test. The next morning, fake news spread across the city like wildfire. Headlines claimed that Evergreen Tech Solutions had suffered a massive financial crash and lost every single dollar. Chinedu moved out of his palace and rented a tiny, cracked apartment in the poorest part of town. He called his closest friends, asking for a small loan to buy food. Every single one of his wealthy friends hung up the phone. His best friend, James, told him he was busy and blocked his number. The moment the gold was gone, the smiles disappeared. Chinedu sat in his dark, cold room, listening to the silence. But then came a soft knock at the door. Chinedu opened the door. Standing in the hallway was Blessing. She was carrying 2 heavy bags groceries, a warm, home-cooked meal. She did not look at the cracked walls or the dirty floor. She walked inside, set the food on the table, and told him to eat before the food got cold. For 2 weeks, while the rest of the world mocked Chinedu, Blessing came to his small apartment every single evening after her job search. She brought him business plans she had written by hand, showing him how he could start over small. She even pulled out an envelope containing her small life savings and placed it in his hands. Chinedu stared at the money with tears in his eyes. He looked at her and asked why she was doing all this for a ruined man who had nothing left to give her. Blessing looked down, her voice trembling. She confessed that she had loved him from the very first day she saw him at the office, not because of his wealth, but because of how kindly he treated his workers, how hard he worked, and how noble his heart was. She told him she didn't care if he lived in a palace or on the street. She just wanted to stand beside him. Chinedu pulled Blessing into his arms and began to cry. He wiped his tears, took her hand, and told her it was time to go home. He drove her back to the giant mansion. Blessing stood in the driveway, completely confused, asking why they were at his old palace. The grand front doors opened. Standing inside was Madame Zakura, wearing a beautiful silk gown and smiling warmly. Chinedu turned to Blessing and revealed the final truth. The crash was fake. The bankruptcy was a test. The poverty was an illusion. Blessing stood frozen. Chinedu dropped to one knee, pulled out a ring that sparkled like the stars, and asked the girl who loved him when he was poor to be his wife. Blessing covered her face and cried tears of pure joy as she said, "Yes!" The next day, Chinedu walked back into the headquarters of Evergreen Tech. He called a general meeting and announced that the bankruptcy was over. He reinstated all the humble, loyal workers, giving them massive bonuses, while firing every single executive who had abandoned him during the fake crisis. The wedding was the grandest event the country had ever seen. White flowers covered the chapel, and thousands of people gathered to watch the billionaire marry his secretary. Standing in the front row, wearing a crown fit for a queen, was Madame Zakura. She looked at her son standing proud and strong next to a woman with a heart of pure gold. She remembered the cold night her family threw her into the rain 23 years ago. She remembered the blisters on her feet from hawking oranges. She remembered the tears she cried when Emeka walked away. Every single drop of pain had been worth it. Nadu took the microphone, looked at his mother in front of the entire crowd, and declared that every dollar he owned, every victory he had achieved, and every joy he felt belonged to the woman who refused to give up on him when the world said he was nothing. Triumphantly, love built on money will crumble in a day, but love built on truth, sacrifice, and loyalty will last forever. If this story touched your heart, write "Love Conquers All" in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another incredible story.